I have been warning for years that Stagflate tax lie would get worse. We've been seeing more and more evidence that the currency debasement, the currency devaluation from governments and central banks, especially here in the United States, where the Federal Reserve has the world's reserve currency at its disposal, is doing massive amounts of asset price inflation, the Cantillon effect. And despite the changing propaganda index lying about the real inflation rate, the numbers are still the highest they have been in terms of phony government inflation in 40 years since the 1970s stagflation. But things are about to get worse. So recently, the IRS has issued some new guidance. They are talking about, because of inflation, that individuals and businesses will be moved to higher and higher tax brackets over the next couple of years. So the changes are not going to start off massively, but this is just adding to the tax component of Stagflate tax lie. So you have the inflation component, the currency devaluation component of Stagflate tax lie. Then you also have the tax component. Because if you study financial history, what governments, whether they are an empire, whether they are a monarchy, have routinely done throughout history is that as the economy gets worse and worse and worse, there is more currency devaluation or currency debasement, or what Austrian school economists would call inflation, where the money supply is either debased or the supply of money, currency, and credit increases a lot. And then also taxes. I think the tax component added to this is what a lot of other people, a lot of other analysts and economists miss, because throughout history, not only are governments devaluing currencies, they're also in combination raising taxes. And you're starting to see that now with the new IRS guidance here in the United States, where because of the inflation, they're moving incomes for personal income and for corporate income that were at a lower tax bracket into a higher tax bracket. So that's going to be happening over the next couple of years too. So it's unfortunate, it's sad. The best way you can improve on this to beat Stagflate tax lie, you have to be creative. If you just try to pinch pennies, it's not going to work. You have to figure out how to grow your income, whether that's buying inflation hedges, whether that's doing side jobs, whether that's starting a new side business, or growing your income in other creative ways, and then learning how to invest to beat Stagflate tax lie. And on top of this, governments are also just hammering more and more propaganda. This article on your right, that inflation is good, it came out on a major business website. Unbelievable. That inflation is good because it raises wages. That was the argument. The problem that was left out is that even though some wages might go up, they are not rising and offsetting the real inflation rate. So the savings, purchasing power, and income of people is not rising to offset the real inflation rate. The real inflation rate now is already double digits, plus governments are now, especially here in the US, are now already planning on increasing taxes. And some of the tax proposals, and not only are politicians and bureaucrats planning on increasing income tax here in the United States, they're also planning on going after asset prices even more. Hidden in some of these new bill proposals, whether it's the infrastructure bill or others, are new rules and regulations and also taxes for things like cryptocurrency and other asset prices. But there's been scams for years with property taxes in many cities and states and counties here in the United States. Finally, if you like content like this and want to help keep content like this free so it doesn't all end up behind a paywall, or you want far more in-depth content, research, financial education, and analysis than I provide in these short little free videos, it is only $5 a month to become a patron, the cost of a Starbucks cup of coffee. And now there are over 190 articles, charts, and audio podcasts behind the paywall, all for the cost of a Starbucks cup of coffee. And just in the last 21 or so weeks, there are now 33 new articles out on a lot of interesting topics about global macro, companies and sectors, gold mining, silver mining, precious metal royalty and streaming companies, uranium, and other interesting topics. And the last 3 articles and audio podcasts that came out in the last week or so are a uranium audio podcast update with a mini article, the state of the gold miners for Q3 2021. Hint, it's not good for regular gold miners. And then also a global macro article on asset price valuations here in the United States. There is very few cheap things anymore, but you're starting to see a lot of interesting contrarian indicators that happen towards the stock market top, with all bearish hedge fund bets blowing up, hedge funds that have bearish bets being closed. These are normally, at least in the past, these were contrarian indicators, although now with governments and central banks hell-bent on asset price inflation, currency devaluation, and stagflate tax lie, who knows what the new normal is? Although if there is quote-unquote deflation, it will probably only be for a couple months or a couple weeks at this point, based on how short deflation has, and quote-unquote deflation has been allowed for very short periods of time in 2008 and 2009. It was only allowed for about 6 to 8 months. And then in February and March of 2020, deflation was only allowed for about 6 to 8 weeks before more QE, more bailouts, more rules changes, more goalposts moving, more asset price inflation, and more press releases of liquidity programs to try to pump asset prices in the markets higher. Because governments are increasingly more reliant on capital gains taxes, on stocks, bonds, real estate, and soon crypto. So if I could wrap up this short little video very quickly, governments, especially the United States government, are hell-bent on stagflate tax lie. I wish I could tell you that things were going to get better for everyone, but you have to prepare. You have to expect the worst and hope for the best. You have to figure out how to grow your income, and you have to buy inflation hedges if you can afford to do so. Some of the valuations on these are not very good. Maybe there's cash for an opportunity in case there's a stock market crash. You might have a short window to buy some good assets at a cheaper valuation, at a much cheaper valuation than now. But overall, governments are, especially here in the United States, at the federal, state, and local level, are coming up with new tax schemes to pick your pocket faster. Whether that's the inflation tax or the stealth tax with currency devaluation and debasement, and now the new guidelines that the IRS just issued, how in the next couple years, people, because of inflation, personal income tax and small business or corporate income taxes, people are going to be moved into higher and higher tax brackets. They're going to have to pay a higher tax on, with purchasing power terms, less income. So even though the nominal income might go up, your purchasing power is declining, you're still going to be taxed at a higher income, at a higher nominal income, because the government says, because of inflation, you're moved into a new tax bracket and you're going to have to pay a higher tax. Welcome to dystopia. And the property tax scam is even worse than this here in the United States at the state and local level. These governments have been getting property values reappraised in many areas for years now. Say if a bunch of old houses are torn down and new houses are built in Fairfax County, the county will reappraise the value of your house, and then you will have to pay higher and higher property taxes. This has been going on for years, but governments are going after corporations, governments are going after small businesses, and governments are going after asset prices for stocks, bonds, real estate. And if this infrastructure bill passes, and I know the crypto people are trying to fight it, there's going to be more rules, regulations, and taxes for crypto too for American citizens.